Hi Mindsetters, it is Mahesh Lal with you for an hour for today's accounting lesson, and it's always fantastic to be here. A huge thank you to our sponsors Liberty, and again a reminder from me for you guys to download the Tenfold education app. So if you haven't, please remember to do that. Right guys, so in today's lesson, we are focusing on the production cost statement. Remember, we obviously did this last week. We spent 2 hours on the production cost statement and all the calculations involved. We also touched on break even. So in today's lesson, we will be continuing with this section in terms of accounting. Now remember exactly what I said last week. This section is quite important for your exam, lots of marks, and the nice part is that it's lots and lots of easy marks. Okay, right, so let's get started. Now remember Mindsetters, when we're looking at the production cost statement, and I know that I obviously did this last week, when we look at our business premises, remember the bulk of the premises, the space is obviously taken by the factory. That is where the production takes place. Then we've got a small office where all the admin takes place. Right, and then obviously we've got our warehouse, and this is where all our selling and distribution takes place. Now going back to last week's lesson, remember your production cost statement focuses on what happens in the actual factory. I know I'm repeating this, but remember guys, the more something is repeated to you, the more you remember. So what happens in the factory? Remember, we take our direct material to our direct material that was used in the production process. We then look at our direct labor cost, and then we look at all our factory overheads. So remember, factory overheads, all your indirect costs. So your indirect costs that obviously relates to the actual factory or relates to the production itself. Okay, so always guys, whenever you start with a manufacturing question or a production cost question, please remind yourself of this. Okay, now in terms of admin and selling and distribution cost, when we calculate net profit, this is when we take into account our admin expenses for the year, as well as your selling and distribution expenses or selling and distribution costs for the year when we're calculating net profit. But remember, when we're calculating the cost of production, we are only concerned about what happens in the actual factory itself. Okay, right, so let's now get started with an actual question. So in this particular question, I want to go through the information first, and then we'll look at what is required. So looking at our information A, I'm given balances, so stock balances from the general ledger. So remember, 1st of March 2016 is beginning of the year. And then 28th of Feb 2017 is obviously the end of the financial year. Okay, right, then information B, information extracted from the financial records on the 28th of Feb 2017. So I'm given admin costs, direct material cost, factory overheads, selling and distribution cost, very, very interesting. They're giving me net wages, SARS, PAYE, UIF deductions. So clearly I can see they are not giving me the gross wages. And remember, when I'm doing the production cost statement, my focus is on gross wages. So that is missing. Then I've got sales and cost of sales, and then further information about obviously the expenses that I've mentioned above. Okay, right, so required. What are we expected to do for this question? Prepare the production cost statement for the year ended 28th of Feb 2017, and then calculate the net profit for the year ended 28th of Feb 2017. Now guys, as you can see, quite a long question because there's quite a bit of information. So let's get started and let's see how long it takes for us to actually complete this question. So as usual, I'm going to ask you guys to work with me. So please have your pen, paper in front of you, have your calculator in front of you, and calculate, work with me, because that's the best way for you guys to revise this section of work. Right, so we're going to start off with the production cost statement. So as you can see, a format is not given to me, so a perfect way in which we can go through the format as well. So we're going to start off with your prime cost. Right, and as we all know, prime cost is the sum of my direct material cost. Okay, direct material cost, I'm leaving a bit of space for calculations, as well as direct labor cost. Right, so we're going to start off by calculating our prime cost, and let's start with the information that's going to assist us for direct material costs. So let's go back to our info. Right, so looking at the information given, direct material cost amounts to 918,550, and there is also additional information given in terms of raw materials. So I'm going to start off by bringing down this total of 918,550. So let's do that first. So in brackets, 918,550, and now let's go to our additional information. Right, so let's read through this information first. A problem was identified regarding the valuation of closing stock of raw materials. 5,000 meters of materials on hand with a unit cost of 2 Rand 75 per meter was in error recorded as 3 Rand 80 per meter. This must be corrected. Okay, right, now guys, closing stock. Remember, your closing stock obviously reduces your raw materials that were purchased for the year. So what am I referring to? Remember, when you are calculating raw materials used, you obviously start off with opening balance, raw materials on hand at the beginning of the year. To this, I then add my purchases, right? If there's any carriage on raw materials, I've got to add carriage. And then finally, I've got to subtract my closing stock. And that will give me my direct material cost, or raw materials that were used in the financial year. Now, if we look at the information given, we can clearly see that the business subtracted too much. Now, what am I referring to? 5,000 meters were on hand. Okay, so 5,000 meters of material was on hand, not used at the end of the year. And that material had a unit cost of 2 Rand 75. Okay, so the correct value of my raw materials on hand in this particular case for the 5,000 meters, let's just clear that. So 5,000 times 2 Rand 75, and that gives me an amount of 13,750, which is obviously the correct value that should have been subtracted. Now, instead of subtracting 13,750, by mistake, we recorded this as 3 Rand 80 per meter. So in other words, the error that we made, we took 5,000 times an incorrect meter price of 3 Rand 80, and we subtracted an amount of, so let's do that one more time, 5,000 times 3 Rand 80, so we subtracted 19,000, which is clearly an error. Right, as accounting students, you can clearly see that the business obviously subtracted too much. Okay, I'm going to go a bit slower now. So remember, we should have only subtracted 13,750, but by mistake, we subtracted a bit too much. We subtracted 19,000. So how do I fix this? I need to then add the difference. Okay, remember I subtracted too much, and I'm now going to add back what I subtracted, the amount that I over subtracted by. So let's calculate that amount. So 19,000 minus 13,750, and I am now going to add 5,250 to my direct material cost. Okay, so let's do that. Direct material cost, we are now adding back what we over subtracted, so plus 5,250. Okay, right, we can now close brackets, and that will give us our direct material cost for the year. So let's just add up these two amounts. Let's fix that. Plus 918,550, and that gives us an amount of 923,800. Okay, so let's record that as 923,800, and that is my direct material cost. Okay. Right, let's now move on to direct labor cost. Now, I want you guys to please pay attention, because even direct labor cost is not as straightforward as it often is in an example. Okay, so looking at the information given, net wages paid to factory workers, so they're giving me the net wage. They are also giving me SARS PAYE. UIF deductions, 1% is clearly not given. Right, so I'm going to write that down. And again, guys, I'm doing this for a reason. Okay, so remember, gross wage is our expense for the year. And we can clearly see the gross wage is not given to us. They are, however, giving us the net wage. Okay, so that is given, and let's fill in the net wage. So the net wage, an amount of 753,300. So I'm just going to take that through. So 753,000. Okay, 753,300. Right, then we've got SARS, that is also given to us. So PAYE, the amount of tax that was deducted. So again, let's find that amount, and let's take that amount through. So SARS PAYE 48,600. Okay, so an amount of 48,600. That amount is given to me. Right, and then finally, there was also a UIF deduction. Okay. And this is 1%. I'm just going to quickly go back and show you guys where I'm getting this from. Right, so UIF deductions, 1%. So clearly that amount is not given to me. Okay, so 1%, they are filled that in, and this amount is missing. Right, now remember grade 12, I need to calculate my gross wages. Now, your gross wages is always the 100%, okay? 100% before any deductions. So looking at the figures that are given to me, all I've got to do is obviously add. So if I take my net wages, and to my net wages, I'm now adding my SARS. Okay, so let's do that. 753,300 plus the tax amount, 48,600. That is giving me an amount of 801,900. I just want to quickly double check that, 801,900. Now, remember, I want the gross wage. So as a percentage, I want 100 divided by I have. So remember, this also added up should be 100, but the 1% is missing. So in other words, I have 100 minus 1. I am only given 99% of the amount. Okay, so if I now take my calculator out one more time, I am now able to calculate my gross wage. Okay, so let's do that. Times I want the gross wage, which is 100, divided by I have 99% of the amount. So that would give me my gross wages an amount of 810,000. Okay, so clearly we can see the 1% that is missing. I can obviously take 810,000 minus the 801,900, or I can simply say 810,000 times 1%, and that would give me the amount that was missing, 8,100. Okay, right, now going back to the question, what do I need from this calculation? I need my gross wage. We're going to get to UIF in a moment. So let's take our gross wage through, and if we go back to our production cost statement, direct labor costs, so our gross wage, an amount of 810,000. Right, wages sorted. Is there any additional contribution made by the worker? So that's what we now need to look for. So if we go back to our information, okay, so if we go further down, the employer contributes, let's just get a different color pen. So the employer contributes 1% to UIF on behalf of the employees. Okay, so exactly the figure that we calculated earlier on, the 8,100, remember it's the same amount contributed by the workers. The employer, who is the business, contributes also 1% towards UIF. So remember, this is now an additional expense for the business. Right, so if we go back to our direct labor cost, we're now going to include this additional contribution of 8,100. Right, so direct labor cost almost sorted, so plus 810,000. Okay, and that gives us an amount of 818. Okay, got to get the calculator out one more time, 818,100. Right, so direct material cost plus direct labor cost is going to give us our prime cost. Let's add that together, so plus 923,800, and that gives us an amount of 1,749,000, 1,741,900. Let me just double check, guys. 1,741,900. Okay,